This World Must Die by H.B. Fife. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This World Must Die by H.B. Fife. Lou Phillips sat on the cold metal deck of the control room, seething with a growing dislike for the old man. "What you are here for," the other had told him when the guards had brought Phillips in, "is a simple crime of violence. You'll do, I'm sure." The old man paced the deck impatiently, while a pair of armed guards maintained a watchful silence by the door. Two more men in plain grey shirts and trousers sat beside Phillips, leaning back sullenly against the bulkhead. He guessed that they were waiting for a fourth, remembering that 3 other figures had been hustled aboard with him at the lunar spaceport. The door slid open, allowing another youth in grey uniform to stumble inside. One of the guards in the corridor beyond shoved the newcomer forward, and Philip's eyebrows twitched as he had a closer look. This last prisoner was a girl. He thought she might have been pretty, with a touch of lipstick and a kinder arrangement of her short ash-blonde hair, but he lowered his eyes as her hard, weary stare flickered past him. She walked over to the bulkhead and took a seat at the other end of the little group. The old man turned, scanning their faces critically. "I am in charge of a peculiar project," he announced abruptly. "The director of the lunar detention colony claimed that you 4 are the best he has for our purposes." Long habit kept the seated ones guardedly silent. Seeing, apparently, that they would not relax, he continued, "You were chosen because each of you has received a sentence of detention for life because of tendencies toward violence in one form or another. In our 22nd century civilization, such homicidal inclinations are quite rare due to the law-abiding habits of generations under the Interplanetary Council." He had been pacing the cramped space left free by the equipment, the guards, and the 4 seated prisoners. Now he paused, as if mildly astonished at what he was about to say. "In fact, now that we are faced by a situation demanding illegal violence, it appears that no normal citizen is capable of committing such an act. Using you may eliminate costly screening processes and save time. Incidentally, I am Anthony Varrett, Undersecretary for Security in the Council." None of the 4 showed any overt sign of being impressed. Phillips knew that the others, like himself, were scrutinizing the old man with cold, secretive stares. They had learned through harsh experience to keep their own counsels. Varrett shrugged. "Well, then," he said dryly, "I might as well call the roll. I have been supplied with accurate records." He drew a notebook from his pocket, consulted it briefly, then nodded at the man next to the girl. "Robert Brecken," he recited. "Age 31, 6 feet, 185 pounds. Hair reddish-brown, eyes green, complexion ruddy. Convicted of unjustified homicide by personal assault while resisting arrest for embezzlement. Detention record unsatisfactory. Implicated in 2 minor mutinies." He glanced next at the youth beside Phillips. "Raymond Truesdale. Age 22, 5 feet 5, 130. Hair black, eyes dark brown, complexion pale. Convicted of 2 suicide attempts following failures in various artistic fields. Detention record fair. Psychological report poor." His frosty eyes met Phillips. "Louis Phillips. Age 26, 5'10", 180. Hair brown, eyes brown, complexion darkly tanned. That was before Luna, wasn't it, Phillips? Convicted of unjustified homicide, having assaulted a jet mechanic so as to cause death. Detention record satisfactory." The blonde girl was last in Varrett's review. "Donna Bailey. Age 23, 5'5", 115. Hair blonde, eyes blue, complexion fair. convicted of manslaughter by negligence while piloting an atmosphere sport rocket in an intoxicated condition. Detention record satisfactory." Varret fell silent, regarding them with cynical disgust. His lips twisted slightly with distaste. "There we have it," he said. "A violent-tempered thief from the business world, an over-expensive purchase by a rich playboy who became his widow by her own negligence, a mentally unstable fool who thought he was artistically gifted, and a rocket engineer who was too brutally careless with his own strength when irritated by a space-fatigued helper. I wonder if you'll do—" Phillips felt impelled at last to speak. "Just what plans do you have for us?" he demanded harshly. "Nothing complicated," replied Varret, matching the tone. "We need you to perform a mass murder." Phillips blinked, despite his prison-learned reserve. He heard the girl sucking her breath sharply, and felt the youth beside him begin to tremble. "I have shocked you, I see," sneered Varret. "Well, I assure you, it shocks me also. Probably a good deal more, since I have lived a normal life. However, this is the background. About 3 months ago, we had reports of the outbreak of a deadly plague in one of the asteroid groups. As near as can be determined, it was spread by the crew of an exploratory rocket after the discovery of a new asteroid. It began to sweep through the mining colonies out there with the velocity of an expanding nova." "Where was your health department?" asked the man named Brecken in a sneering tone. Varret frowned at him. "Several members gave their lives trying to learn the nature of the disease. We have no information to date, except a theory that it attacks the nervous and circulatory systems, because the reports indicate that the reason of the victim is markedly affected as the disease progresses. Not a single survivor is known. They all die in a raving insanity. We do not even know with certainty how it is communicated." "What are you doing?" asked Phillips. "Isolation. It is all we can do until our medical men can make some progress. We evacuated an asteroid colony and began to ship into it any person showing any of the symptoms, using a cruiser piloted by remote control. That was where we slipped." "How?" "On the last trip, unless we have not really collected all the sufferers, we lost control. Someone being transported knew his spaceships. Shortly thereafter, a gibbering lunatic got on the screen and threatened the escorting rocket. He announced the cruiser would head for Mars, where the passengers would demand their freedom. They are past reasoning with."
"Can't say I really blame them," Phillips remarked.
"Blame them? Of course not. Neither do I. What has that to do with it? What has the Council so worried is that this thing will get loose on Mars. That it may even be carried to Earth and Venus. There are over 100 persons in that ship, no longer responsible for their actions, but capable of causing deaths by the billions. We want to help them, but we simply must hold the line on this quarantine until we solve the medical problem."
They stared at him in silence, and Phillips noticed that the old man's forehead was moist with tiny beads of perspiration.
"Don't you see? They are as good as dead. No knowledge or help of man can save them, as of this moment. If we are ever to be of any help, we must prevent a worse catastrophe. Yes, the survival ship is a world in itself, but this world must die."
For a minute or two, it seemed to Phillips that he could hear each person in the control room breathing. Finally, there was a small sound of cloth rubbing on metal, as Brecken stirred.
"Why pick on us?" he rasped, from his seat on the deck. "I'm no volunteer." "I know what you are," replied Varret sharply. "I know what you all are. You have been chosen for this mission of murder because you are the only people in our culture who are capable of this kind of violence. You have broken our laws, and this is your punishment. It would take us too long to find others like you, who had merely never faced the same circumstances that sent you forth to Luna. We have made attempts to attack this vessel, manned by normal men. Our ships could accomplish nothing."
"Why not?"
asked Phillips. "The crew's foul?"